Well, we got 3 of us here?
4, I think.
Really?
President Deere, we're ready to begin at your call.
Well, I'm ready to begin at your call. I'll call the meeting to order. This is the special board meeting of the West Bay Municipal Water District, starting at 10:04. A little late, I think. Would you call roll for the quorum, please?
Happy to do so. Director Desi Alvarez.
Here.
Director Gloria Gray.
Here.
Director Williams. Vice President Scott Houston.
Here.
And President Don Deere.
Present, and we have 4 members, so we have a quorum. Is there any public comment?
President Deere, we have not received any requests for public comment today. However, I do see that we have members of the public that have joined us. If somebody would like to speak under public comment, please use the raised hand feature at the top of the screen.
All right.
Seeing and hearing none, President Deere.
Okay, are there any presentations?
We have no presentations.
Do we have an action calendar?
We have no action items.
All right, we'll go on to information item 6A.
Yes, President Deere, item 6A is our first information calendar item. It is our fiscal year 2022 to 2023 program budget for the water policy and resources development programs. And for this, as we've done in all of our presentations so far, we do have our executive manager of finance, Margaret Moja, here for the presentation.
Thank God. What will we do without Margaret?
Oh, goodness. Thank you so much. All right. Well, good morning, directors. Welcome this morning here on March 16th. Here we are, as EJ has indicated, we're here to present to you the program budget for the water policy and resources development budget. Starting on page 7, if we could go to that page there. Again, one more page back, please. Thank you. So again, just to start off each of our workshops, I want to remind us that the reason we're here is to provide a safe and reliable supply of high quality water to the communities we serve. And the role of our water policy department is essential into that service there. They're there to provide us input as it relates to the regional decisions that are being made. They help us with grant funding, and they are able to help us look at those local supply of waters and see where we fit into the overall equation. So with that, I ask you to turn to page 8 of your PDF packet, and let's begin talking about the numbers for fiscal year 22-23 for water policy. As you can see here, we have a budget of $2.1 million here. And as I shared with you, the Water Policy Department is there to help us with analysis as it relates to demand management. They look for grants for the agency, and they provide customer support and also work with our legislative advocates to make sure that we understand the rules and regulations that are out there or coming up on our way to make sure that we are prepared for them. In that box there, which says budget objectives, these were the same items that we shared with you on January 19th at our Finance and Administration Committee. And those are to make sure that we have a further development of our water demand and supply modeling for our customer agencies. Certainly with the drought conditions that are going on, the better we understand sort of where we are going with our water sales is incredibly important to us, as many of our sales, many of our revenues, I should say, is based off of that volumetric number. So understanding sort of where that demand is going will allow us to better budget for us in the future. We also, as I mentioned, take this opportunity in this group to look for grant opportunities to offset that cost there. So it's not going to our users, but rather where can we get maybe federal, state grants that help us support not only our conservation or water use efficiency programs, but also grants and efforts that might support some of our local projects. And we also want to focus in on to providing you improved reporting around our water supply and demand, again, with the drought conditions here, and we're seeing some impact of that, understanding sort of where it is. And lastly, as I mentioned, our legislative impacts and how that takes us there. So let's turn to the next page on page 9. And this gives you that side-by-side comparison that we shared at the previous presentations on the program budgets. As you can see here, we relatively stay around that $2 million mark, both from an actual perspective of 1.8 million in fiscal year 2021 to 1.7 is where we project to be for this fiscal year in 21-22. This is slightly down from budget, and largely you can see that that is somewhat in the area of our district labor and benefits, and it's as a result of our manager of that particular area serving in the role of our interim general manager. The time that he would have allocated to this place here would have been charged here. However, his time is being allocated through that indirect cost payroll allocation. But if you look to the comparative balances between 21-22, that third column, if you will, that 2086,815 compared to the 2103,727, we see a slight uptick there. And again, what you see there is somewhat aligned, if you will, with the dollars associated with staff time associated with this particular program. So with that, I want to turn to the next slide, which is slide 10 of your PDF packet. And on the far left, the pie chart that you see there, you see sort of the breakdown of where those level of efforts of those dollars are. You can see the large portion there is that this is a staff-driven program budget. We have a lot of staff effort here for all the things that we do here. And we do use some consultants here, and we'll get into some of those numbers in just a moment. But that just gives you sort of an indication of sort of where that level of effort is. And you can see that level of effort of the FTE count in that bottom blue box that you see at the bottom of the page. You can see that we are showing a relatively same amount of sort of time, if you will, between 4.81 and 4.80 between the 2 years, a slight uptick, if you will, of direct labor that is being charged to this particular budget. Now, up in the stacked bars chart that you see there, we're showing you the 4-year programmatic budgets there, and you can see that it's been relatively flat over the last 2 years, a slight decrease from 2021. And the reason for that in 2021 is we had the Urban Water Management Plan study that needed to be done, and so that work was completed and submitted in June of 2021. And so you can see that that higher sort of blue bar that you see there is for those studies that was associated to the Urban Water Management Plan. And you'll see and hear going forward how we intend to sort of build on those efforts for the Urban Water Management Plan through that additional analysis on demand analysis. So with that, I'm happy to turn you to the next slide, which is slide 11 of your packet. This goes into a little bit more detail as it relates to our costs associated with this thing, to this particular program budget. The first one I wanted to focus in is our state, federal, and advocacy services here. We have both a legislative advocate and at the federal level and at the state level, and the sum total of those two contracts, if you will, brings about $321,000 of consultant dollars here. And on this page here, we focus in on what our 22-23 goals are, as well as our accomplishments that you can see what was able to be accomplished through the work that our legislative advocates do for us, which is shown in the yellow box, if you will. So again, just to highlight 22-23, what those dollars will go towards is, again, to make sure that we're working with them to seek out that state and federal funding, to track those legislative proposals that might have a potential impact on West Basin, to build those relationships with their elected officials. I know just at yesterday's Water Policy Committee, we heard about some changes, if you will, within our own sort of delegation, if you will, of those that to sort of represent our areas there. And so again, it's important to work with them and our staff to make sure that collectively we can share the good works of West Basin on what we do. We want to make sure that we're advocating for the efforts with other water agencies associated with it. And we want to be in a position to either be in a position to support or show our additional comments, if you will, as it relates to legislation. So with that, I will turn us to the next slide, which is slide 12 of your packet. And that talks about our water bottle and filling station. This is a program that over the years we have been continuing to improve on and deliver out to our customers. As you know, we have sort of a grant program here in which we go out and we work with our customer agencies and our cities to try to find places where we can put these water bottle filling stations. It's a small way to sort of increase that messaging around, if you will, the importance of using that drinking water rather than going out and seeking it somewhere else through bottled waters, if you will. And in that effort there, we work with those entities to make sure that we get them in their location. We, advocate sort of what the purpose is. We have photo opportunities and all that stuff with our board members to really highlight, if you will, the importance of working on this particular thing. This is a particular budget that's been at about $35,000 for the last few years. We do anticipate sort of maintaining that budget for this fiscal year and really making sure that we fully utilize the dollars that you see there. Turning to the next slide on page 13 of your PDF packet, it really focuses in on the grant efforts here. Listed on the right are some of the places where we do anticipate seeing some of that grant funding there, from the Army Corps of Engineers through the Department of Water Resources, the State Water Resources Control Board. Again, through the efforts of our staff, we are able to really hone in on where those specific grant opportunities are there. But we do want to elicit the help of our consultant to help us with some of those grant requirements there, to help us, again, also be in a position to help us research and submit for those applications. We want to work with them to make sure that the words that were used on the page will be the impetus, if you will, for those on the other side to say, yes, we want to fund these projects. And so the role here is the consultant dollars of about $75,000. This is a slight uptick that we had from the current year's budget. And the reason for that is we want to take that extra dollars to really focus in on our water use efficiency. We know how important it is to get that message out there about water use efficiency. And so we want to use some additional dollars there to find those grants, get those grants into the district here to offset the district's costs. And finally, to our last slide here in the water policy section is our water supply and demand modeling. As I mentioned earlier, this is really to build off of this, the work that we had done with the urban water management plan. We have, received some great input, if you will, and this just further builds on to that particular work. So again, here we're looking at doing one-on-one meetings with our retail agencies, understanding those statewide objectives, understanding their groundwater activities, what their short and long-term planning is, and making sure that we understand where are they going so that we can plan adequately for us. And in that effort there, we will be in a better position to understand where our own water sales are going. On the right, you see the accomplishments that we had there. We have made some great effort already, and this just continues that efforts, finalizing that work that's there. And based off of the work that we see here, you'll go back to that one of those key tenets that I mentioned on that first slide with the budget drivers objectives, is that we wanted to provide some reporting to you. And so we will be able to share with you sort of where we're going with those water sales. So that's a quick update, if you will, as it relates to the water policy budget, and I will turn it over to EJ if he would like to add anything. I know he's very well attuned to what's happening into this effort, but we also have staff on board to answer any questions that the directors may have.
All right.
No, Margaret, that was a great presentation, and staff is happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Apparently no questions. Amazing. So well done. Thank you,
I
Margaret.
have questions. I was just waiting for you to ask if anybody had questions.
Oh, I'm going to ask. Does anybody have any questions? Director Alvarez.
A couple of questions. On the grant funding, you're showing a budget this year of $75,000 for consultant. How much was budgeted last year?
We budgeted, I believe it was 50,000 last year.
And how much did we use?
We're anticipating using a little less than that this year. Let me see if I can get my number up. One moment. Looks like we are looking to, I'm sorry, we budgeted 40 and we're looking to budget or spend around 25.
And And Director Alvarez, if I could add to that, one of the things that West Basin had previously done in years past, several years ago, was really utilize the services of a consultant to help us prepare and finalize our grant applications. You know that both at the state and federal level, there seems to be an inflow of additional funds available through several different organizations, some of which were included in this slide. And in addition to that, the Greater LA County Integrated Regional Water Management is expected to roll out the next round of funding, which we hope to provide some projects in there. We do have them in the Opti database, and we're hopeful that we could possibly get money for some conservation programs. And within that, there's extensive costs as far as the consultants are concerned, as far as preparing those applications. So that's the reason for the additional funds.
Committee meeting.
Okay, but you know, it seems like the track record is we don't use what we budgeted, and this time we're budgeting quite a bit more than the previous year. Same question for the water supply and demand modeling. Did we budget anything this year?
Yes, we did budget around $60,000. This is just continuing the work with our current consultant that is providing us, again, that did the urban water management plan. So that is to round out that there. But I see Matt came on screen. Maybe he can share some additional context.
Yeah, Director Alvarez, we actually moved some budget over to take this year's first initial one, which we budgeted $10,000 for work this year. And the plan there is that they would help us with this initial one, kind of coordinating with Metropolitan and some of the other retail agencies. But then on a going forward basis, we would be able to manage that ourselves internally.
Okay, but budgeted in 21, 22, 60,000 or 10,000?
10,000. The 60,000 is actually related to the water supply and demand modeling. So different things.
Thank
Okay.
you, Matt, for the clarification.
Oh, but I was asking about water and supply and demand modeling. It's showing that for 22, 23, we're budgeting 25,000. This is on 14.
That's correct. So that work will be, so right now we're in the process of developing the individual demand and supply models with our 5 municipal and county retail agencies. What we would do next year is to take that information that's done by the end of June, and then also add in some of the new information that's coming online about the water statewide water use objectives, and then packaging that into some type of toolkit or other outreach kind of portfolio that we can share on a one-on-one basis with each of those retailers to prepare them for what's coming ahead. What we're finding is that a lot of these retail agencies have, maybe 1 or 2 staff that are kind of committed to learning about and carrying out the different water use objectives that are coming forth. And so we're trying to prepare them for that with the additional work. So that's what the $25,000 would help us accomplish.
Okay, who does that?
Well, we would have to farm it out. We would hope that it might be the same consultants that helped us with the urban water management plan and who are conducting the supply and demand modeling, since they are most familiar with our programs and what we're doing. So that would be the intent, but
Who is it?
that is Water Systems Consulting and Mad House Water Management.
All right. And then in the current budget, in the 21, 22 budget for water supply and demand modeling, we have 60,000.
I believe we have budgeted $40,000 total, because we moved some over for the water supply and demand assessment. So the board approved kind of finishing out the work for the end of this fiscal year, which would take us up to the board authorized amount. So I don't have the exact figure, Margaret, but I believe we have budgeted 40, but
All right, so of the 40, we spent the 40, and then you're gonna spend another 25,000 updating the modeling.
That's correct.
And-
Yeah, and doing the outreach.
And that includes outreach.
Yes.
Okay. So going back to page 11. This is for the advocacy services, which is 321,000 proposed. That's for our federal and our state lobbyists, right?
Correct.
And how much was it this year? 21, 22?
So 21, 22, we had a total of just under $350,000. And that had assumed that because we were we knew that last year there was at the end of their 2-year term, and we weren't sure what their price point would be. So we had assumed an increase, but they were able to hold their prices. And so the prices that you see here in fiscal year 22, 23 brings you to that total of 321. So we had some, for lack of a better word, savings, but it's because we have a known number now that was there because we have a monthly retainer that we're paying them.
Okay, so
And Margaret, if I could just add to that, that goes back to direction that was provided by the board of directors. West Basin staff did reach out to both our state and federal agencies or federal lobbyists. We did discuss with them our budget concerns, and they did agree to extend those agreements at their previous pricing, which we established a couple of years ago. So no increases there. And as Margaret pointed out, though we anticipated potential increases, we were able to get them down to that original amount.
well, that's very good. Thank you for that explanation. That's what I was looking for, that we were able, that our consultants, at least at the federal and state level for lobbying services, were able to hold their prices. Which brings me to my last point. I keep seeing as we go through these presentations and that we're increasing our budget from FY 21-22 to FY 22-23 on almost everything. I haven't seen one that hasn't gone down. So, for example, with water policy and resource development, current budget is $2,086,000. Proposed budget's $2,100,000. Not much of a difference in this particular case, but still an increase. I'm still hoping to see at some point that we can do, like at least some of our consultants, that we don't increase our budgets and even maybe come in with a lower budget. I'm still very concerned about long-term implications of where we are in terms of losing the $10 million a year in the parcel tax and in reduced water sales. And in general, a lot of the increases that we do not have control over that we're going to have to pass through. So it's a little bit disappointing for me to always see that everything is always an increase and that we're not looking at internally seeing some, generating some savings.
Yeah, and if I could clarify for you, and I hear your point, and I appreciate your statements there, absolutely. In this particular budget, we are seeing, I'll say, a decrease, if you will, in the federal and state legislative, as you heard us mentioned. We do anticipate having a higher use, if you will, for consultants, so that maybe that's somewhat offset there. But really what's increasing the budget here is the district labor and benefits. But I will say where we are refining those numbers as certain recruitment decisions are being made, we will be refining those numbers, and hopefully you'll see some, I know you will see some savings there.
Thank you. That's all.
Thank you.
And
Does
Director Alvarez,
anyone else?
Director Alvarez, if I could just add one last piece of information related to the grant consultants. It's important to note that the funds that we're setting aside for our grants is definitely time and materials needed. We would not utilize any services of a consultant as it relates to applying for a grant unless we found that the grant was a great opportunity for West Basin. We could use their assistance. Similarly, when it comes to the Greater LA County Integrated Regional Water Management, unless we had a project that was submitted and unless that project is not just submitted but approved within Greater LA County to be a part of their application package, again, we wouldn't fund the work there. But but we do want the flexibility as far as submitting projects and programs within those grant opportunities. So.
Sure. And Mr. Chair, I'll just want to chime in real fast.
Go ahead, Scott.
I just wanted to also talking in answer to Director Alvarez. I think it was last year, whenever that was, when we were looking at the budget for our lobbyists, and I was the one that actually asked and suggested, and they were with us to maintain that pricing. So we're very grateful for that. But that was where that came from. So I also want to thank our lobbyists that they were able to hold those prices this next cycle.
Very good.
Well, that, as I mentioned, concludes our comments here on the water policy budget. So if there's any other questions, we're happy to answer them for you.
Apparently not. Thank you.
So with that, EJ, do you want to move to 6B of the agenda?
Is that okay, President Deere?
Yes, please do.
All right. Well, as Margaret just mentioned, the next item is 6B. It's our fiscal year 2022-2023 program budget for our overhead. This does begin on packet page 17, and I do know that the presentation, of course, begins on packet page 20. Margaret, it's all yours.
Thank you so much. I will begin just sharing with you that this here is to go over the overhead costs here to the district. The overhead cost does represent a number of departments, and so you'll hear from the department managers as well with me on this presentation to go over the results here. So if we can turn our attention to page 22 of the packet. So this provides you the side-by-side comparison of our overhead budget, again, showing you both the actual for 2021, the projected for 21-22, the budget for 21-22, and then our proposed budget for 22-23. So just a few things to point out here. In fiscal year 2021, you do see a slightly higher budget that's there. Namely, you see the increase in that board services line item. So every other year when there is an election, we have costs associated with the election. So you see a higher number there. You now will see it again in fiscal year 22-23, since we do have an election coming up in November 22. You also will see that our costs for our building were slightly higher in 2021. We had some repairs that we were doing around the building. I know there's another discussion later on today regarding about the building and what we're planning to do, but we will go into that particular budget as well. But overall, $4.8 million being spent in 2021. We are projecting to be lower in fiscal year 21-22 compared to budget. Largely, you see part of that decrease is in the area of our administration, and that I will say specifically as it relates to legal costs is the reason why you see that big difference that are there. Plus, we had some additional savings, if you will, in our finance and contracts. We had known that we were going to be going out for a cost of issuance. Those costs need to be expensed. The cost came in lower than that, and so that's why you see a sort of a variance there. But we'll go into a little bit more detail on the following slides. But overall, you see an overhead budget when you combine all those individual efforts between administration, board services, building, financing contracts, and human resources, up $4.5 million, slightly below the budget for fiscal year 21-22 of $4,508,000. So I'd like us to turn to the next slide, which is page 23 of your packet. And show you the costs that are associated here. These do represent direct costs associated with it. When we talk about the individuals, the staffing that you that support all of these efforts, in each of those program budgets that you had heard previously, those costs are allocated to each of those individual program budgets. It does represent staffing, like I said, from human resources, our executive team, finance, contracts, and our administration department. And like I said, those costs are being allocated across the various departments. But specifically to the pie chart that you see here, this is the direct cost associated with it here, and you can see sort of a variety of costs associated with them. I know I wanted just to touch upon some of the words that we're using here and what are included in those words, so that as we go into each of the program budgets for each of these sort of divisions, if you will, you'll understand sort of what's incorporated. So in the case of professional services, that's the blue bar or the blue wedge, if you will, that's in there. That does represent dollars due being spent for our financial consultants. It also represents our technology consultants that help us with our variety of software that we use here with the agency. It does also include some dollars associated with like doing strategic planning and other kind of efforts underway there. Our director costs, those costs that are included in that particular line item include the per diem, our allowances, the travel for our directors, and the health benefits associated to those directors. So we've grouped them all together so that you can see what that number represents. Office, for instance, includes our printing, postage, supplies, travel, courier, meeting expense. So it's an accumulation of a number of little items that when you add them up, you get one total there, but that represents what's there. And in our non-professional services, when we get to talking about that one specifically in the budget, the building budget, that one there is for our efforts for our janitorial, our landscaping, and our guard services. So that just gives you a little bit of context associated with what's in each of those wedges, since we did try to do it on a sort of an account category, if you will. Now to the trend information that you see on the right side of that screen, you see there was a big increase in 2021, but then you see that it has come back down. That big increase that you see there is in that green portion of that bar, and that is our administrative costs, where we house, if you will, our legal costs associated with it. In fiscal year 2021, we did anticipate higher sort of, I'll say, special legal counsel as it related to two of our lawsuits that we were undertaking, one being the standby and the other with Ocean D-Cell. As those things are being finalized, if you will, those costs that you can see have been significantly reduced in the current year budget, and so therefore you see them sort of drop down. The other sort of increase that you see there in board services in that fiscal year 22-23, as I mentioned previously, is that increase in that election cost. We've estimated that through this LA County website, if you will, for the 3 divisions that are up for election to be about $600,000. So that's a one-time cost, if you will, this year. And then you'll see it again coming back in 2 years from now when we have the next election. And so with that, I will then now turn it over to our individual department managers to help me sort of convey, if you will, what's within their budget and talk about not only our assumptions, but also our accomplishments. And first up, I have Julie, who will handle administration, also board services and the building.
Thank you, Margaret. Good morning, President Deere, members of the board. Going over the administration budget, Margaret hit on a lot of the highlights. Our department oversees the general district business of our technology, our records management facilities, as well as board services, but particularly in administration, I want to go over some of the line item details. So for professional services, that is the work that we're doing to update our strategic plan, our technology support, real estate transactions and services. And then also we're planning to conduct a manager's retreat with the new GM when he comes aboard. The software license, you'll see that at $709,000. That includes different softwares like Lawson, Acela, which is our agenda management program, Infor, Microsoft, etc. Our legal services at 360, that covers our agreement with AMLO. It does not include additional legal fees. There are some additional ones like for HR, and that's in their budget, and I'm certain that Michelle will cover that. We also have our allotted amount for being a member of LAFCO, and that's our shared proportion of what we're expected to pay. And then Margaret did a phenomenal job talking about office administration, about what that includes, and some of the district operations is just general postage, courier services. It also includes any of our leases for copiers, technology supplies, insurance, and then our memberships and our sponsorships. These are the memberships that the board has elected to continue to be a member of. We will be bringing those to the board, I believe, at our next meeting to talk about the memberships for your consideration that we'll be keeping. And then the sponsorships are the sponsorships that we conduct in our community. Some of the accomplishments that we've modernized the water billing database to the standard query language database, and we've also finalized the standby charge. Next slide. The next one is for board services. This is pretty direct. The cost is the expenses that we use to support the board of directors. We do have professional services that we've set aside if the board does another retreat. With the board that's coming aboard, office administration again is office costs that would cover any courier expenses, technology, supplies, and then the sponsorships are the directors' community outreach sponsorships that we've allotted $15,000 for each board member to conduct community outreach in their respective division. And then, as Margaret stated, the election cost this year we have an estimated at $600, and that's for the elections for divisions 1, 2, and 4.
$600,000.
I'm sorry, what was that?
You said $600. You meant 600,000, did you not?
600,000. Yes, I wish it was 600.
Right.
The next one is our overhead budget for building, and this is ordered for our facilities maintenance to conduct and to maintain and keep everything in compliance, including any permits, upgrading any of the equipment that we need at our facility here at DLD, but also at our satellite facilities. And it also encompasses our parking lot and any other minor repairs that we need to do. The non-professional services, again, as Margaret mentioned before, this includes our security, our janitorial, our pest, our landscaping. And so these are for the professional services that we have on an ongoing basis. And then again, the office administration is some minimal funds that we've set aside for office costs. And then the accomplishments for the overhead budget for building is that we have maintained all of our equipment in the DLD building, and we have and are in compliance with renewing all of our permits, such as the permit for the elevator and such. So all of that is in compliance, and that's where this budget item is allocated. So with those 3 slides, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have about those 3 budgets. Okay.
So next up, and we can certainly circle back once we hear all of the overhead budgets. Next up, we have the finance and contracts budget, and I have Marianne here, our manager of finance, to share on this particular budget.
Thank you, Margaret. Good morning, President Deere, members of the board. I'd just like to take a few minutes this morning to present to you the proposed budget for the finance and contracts portion of the overhead budget. You'll see here on slide 27 of your packet, our total proposed budget for fiscal year 22-23 is $245,300. As Margaret alluded to in her opening statements, that is a decrease from fiscal year budget 21-22, where we did have costs included for the cost of issuance for the refunding that we just completed back in February. Before I go into the numbers, I just want to highlight a few things that the department does do. So you'll see that first box, the top department overhead, the finance department, as you know, is responsible for all the inflows and outflows of funds. And that includes the water billing that we do each month, collecting of all the receipts, investing our funds, paying all the vendors and those things, as well as all the reporting we do. As you are aware, we put together the annual budget, as well as the annual comprehensive financial report, and these reports and other critical information and reports leadership does use, hopefully, to make decisions going forward. In addition, the contracts department is responsible for the procurement of all our goods and services. And in addition, they also oversee the small and local business program. Below that box, you'll see we have a number of objectives this coming year. Want to highlight just a couple of them. We are working on a capital funding policy. This will help us to make decisions and guide us when we use our reserves, when we use external funding, and when we issue debt, both short-term and long-term debt. In addition, we are working on and will continue to work on this next fiscal year, updating our long-term financial model, and we hope to reflect all the updated information that we have once that strategic business plan is completed. In addition, our contracts team will analyze the vendor spend, and on a subcontractor level, our hope is to increase the small and local business spend. Moving over into the particular line items of the proposed budget, you'll see that very top line, which is our professional services. Margaret did mention a few things that are added in there. I just want to just point out these are sort of required services that we need for the district, including our audit, including the fees for our investment managers, our trustee, our custodial services, and those are all included in those professional services. Right below that, you'll see there's a line item for our legal fees, in this case for the finance and contracts team that represents bond counsel. And then right below that, you'll see $32,800. That's for office administration. For us, what that includes is the software that we do use to use our e-procurement software. And then we have a couple other things that we use within the finance department as well. And there's a small amount for the application fees that when we put in for our budget awards or annual comprehensive financial award, there's some fees that we pay in that, and that's included in your office administration. So the total, as I mentioned, is $245,300. And I just want to highlight a few accomplishments that we have done in fiscal year 21 and 22. And these are just a couple. As you can see on the page there, we did complete the refunding recently in February, where we achieved a $5 million present value savings on the 2012 A bonds. In addition, we did receive the certificate of achievement for our annual financial report, and we did receive also budget awards for both GFOA and CSMFO for our fiscal year 21-22 budget. And with that, I'll just pause and see if there are any questions.
Apparently not. Thank you, Margaret. Or Marianne, I mean, Marianne.
And next up, we have the Michelle, who will share on the human resources budget.
Thank you, Margaret. Good morning, President Deere and members of the board. I am here, of course, today to present the human resources overhead budget in terms of all activities related to human resources. So as you can see, the proposed budget for fiscal year 22-23 is $139,410. That is a slight increase from last year's budget, and I will explain throughout the presentation here where some of that increase lies. So in essence, the department overview and human resources includes all activity costs to recruit, screen, and hire new employees. Of course, we have a number of concerted efforts to evaluate salaries and benefits. So we provide complete benefits administration for the district, as well as the cost to support employee professional development training, And in addition, I don't only wear the hat of human resources manager or manager of human resources, but I also wear the hat of the district safety officer and risk manager. So human resources activities also include oversight of risk management and safety for all district facilities. So essentially for the 22-23 budget assumptions, we're looking at expanding efforts towards diversity, equity, and inclusion. As you are aware or may be aware, in 2020, there was a concerted effort throughout the entire nation and the world to further efforts in all agencies to really look at diversity, equity, and inclusion amongst their agencies. And so the district made very concerted and strong efforts to address this issue by initially conducting training for not only staff, but also the board members. And so a part of those efforts includes implementing a diversity, equity, and inclusion team. And so we, again, did not want this effort to be just a one-stop shop for training, but also a long-term effort in looking at DEI amongst the agency. And so that will include some cost to potentially develop a racial equity plan or a plan for the district to fully address diversity, equity, and inclusion across all efforts throughout the agency. Also, you see the slight increase here in our budget because we are looking at conducting a succession planning study. The district is at a very vulnerable state as we stand right now because we do have a number of staff who can pretty much retire any day now. I will speak for the Human Resources Department in particular. Myself and my staff are pretty much at that same range where we can retire virtually at the same time. We have a good at least 5 members within the finance department that can retire, Margaret and Marianne included, can retire at the same time. And so we're in a vulnerable state to really look at how can we succession plan for the agency, because you cannot have managers at this level leaving the agency without really looking at a plan to develop staff and put everyone in a position where we're not in that vulnerable state if people were to retire. So I am looking at conducting a succession plan study, which will incur, a cost for an outside consultant. Further, we are looking at the budget, or I have included monies for the budget to evaluate service delivery for safety and risk management support. While we do have Aqua JPIA at our hands in terms of looking at and developing any issues as it pertains to safety and risk management, we are also in a position where there's occasions where I have to further evaluate these issues. And so while I'm not in a position to be able to hire a dedicated safety or risk manager, we are looking at potentially getting outside support for safety and risk, because when we look at all of our contracts across the board throughout the district, there's always safety and risk indemnification and insurance language that needs to be evaluated. And there are times when that evaluation goes far beyond what Aqua JPIA can provide. And so in essence, we're, looking at including monies for the budget to look at potentially safety and risk management support outside of our regular resources. Then we're also focusing on essential employee development training. So the Human Resources Department is the department that houses all training for staff in terms of professional development. And so we have to maintain a significant training budget so that we ensure that our staff are prepared and always prepared to fully meet the needs of their roles and their positions within the agency. And so that department budget is housed within HR. And then we also, because we all have been, HR is the department where we do look at employee morale and planning employee morale events and activities. So this would include, for example, our employee recognition luncheon. These are very significant activities and events that we think is critical to fund, because again, we are an agency that, of course, is our efforts are primarily to provide, you know, strong resources and service to the public that we serve, but we also may have to maintain a staff of employees that are satisfied within the work that they're doing, and to let them know and feel that they're important and valued. And so in essence, we do also include activities or costs for activities to maintain that employee morale and spirit events. Then lastly, as you can see, some of our department accomplishments for fiscal year 21-22, we did initiate and implement a diversity, equity, and inclusion employee committee, which is represented by various departments within the agency. We have developed a response plan to all things related to COVID-19. And then we also completed 8 employee recruitments and the general manager recruitment. So turning now to, as you can see, this again on package page 28, if you look at the left side of the screen, under professional services, that budget would include, again, any safety risk support that we would be potentially looking for consulting support, succession planning, consulting support, recruitment. In terms of recruitment, while in essence we know that we may not be doing a lot of recruitment for any vacant positions within the agency, we always have to be prepared and set aside a certain amount of monies for recruitments in the event that staff leave and we need to fill behind them. And so recruitment services includes not only just the cost of advertising, but also we have to do background screening and health checks and things of that nature. And so those costs are also recorded within that portion of the budget. Then looking under legal services, and this is very specific to human resources. We do use this as a placeholder annually within our budget, because there are times when, for example, we may need additional research on a specific topic that may come about, whether it's COVID or whether it's some other policy or thing that the district needs to look at. We may need to hire outside legal services that is very specific to human resources. And, or for example, if there are any complaints that are filed and we need to do investigations, this budget would secure some monies or set monies aside in case we need to hire an outside legal firm to look at or investigate any matters that might be too critical for just HR to look into. Then again, as I mentioned earlier, there's some advertising monies that we set aside for purposes of recruitment. And so we typically budget for about 10 recruitments annually or each fiscal year. And so that money is set aside for that. Then office administration would include cost that pertain to professional memberships and specific to human resources related and risk management activities, such as we're members of the Public Agency Risk Management Association, the Southern California Public Labor Relations Council, and the Liebert Cassidy Whitmore Consortium. And so there are fees that we must pay that are germane to additional training for staff and keeping abreast and in tune with certain things, all HR related and safety and risk related. And then this also includes monies that we set aside for our spirit and morale events, and also monies that we have set aside for potentially consulting services in terms of our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts throughout the district. And that would conclude my presentation. If you have any questions, I would be happy to answer.
I have a question. What does the Liebert Cassidy Consortium do?
Very good question. Thank you, President Deere. The Lieber Cassidy Whitmore Consortium, that includes a number of agencies within the South Bay area. So we are are part of the South Bay Consortium. And so essentially they provide training that we can send any of our staff to that would include, and so the fee that we pay includes training for, and we could send all 50 employees if we like, and there's no individual cost, but that consortium fee would allow for training for throughout the entire calendar year or fiscal year. And that includes professional development training as it pertains to supervisory training, a number or host of trainings. Sometimes it involves training as it pertains to CalPERS. And so it also includes free, what they call consortium calls. So for example, if we have a legal issue that we need to have addressed, or a question that we have and we want a legal opinion, that consortium cost also includes, I believe it's about 6 to 10 free calls to their firm to get legal opinions without having additional fees charged to us. So they're free calls to attorneys to give us free legal advice, basically. So that is what the consortium cost involves.
Do we utilize it, that organization?
Oh,
much?
yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Okay.
I will say we have sent staff to training. Right now, of course, the training is virtual for the most part. They typically are in-person trainings, and I would assume that sometime in the near future, they're going to be moving back to that. And so there are a number of agencies like City of Manhattan Beach, City of Redondo Beach, City of Inglewood, a number of agencies within the consortium that host some of these trainings. I would hope that at someday in the near future, the district could host one of the trainings at our ECL facility. However, right now those trainings are virtual, but we do have staff that participate in them, and we definitively have used their consortium call services in the past.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Well, let me take us to the last slide here on just the overhead allocation. Again, all of these costs that you see here, while you see them here on the individual themes, I wanted just to also reflect that these are actually also reflected in each of the other program budgets that you already heard. So in the water policy, public information, recycle water operations, we do allocate the costs over there to show what the overall value to provide that service to on each of those efforts there. And the basis for that allocation is looking at our direct labor hours allocated. So if you have more dollars being or more hours being spent in a particular effort, they're going to get a higher percentage of the dollars, because that usually flows sort of like the level of effort that you have towards it. So there's a lot of effort, if you will, within recycle water operations and from an HR, finance, administrative perspective. And so therefore our dollars will flow towards that. So they're not necessarily being counted twice. We're trying to show you the details underlying, if you will, that allocation you saw in each of the program budgets by this conversation here today. Before we get into the follow-up questions that start on page 30 of your packet, I don't know if we want to pause and see if there's any other questions from the directors on any of the costs relating to the things. The follow-up questions are particularly around the memberships and sponsorships. These were comments that were made at the February 23rd board meeting. And as a result of that, the input from the board here could adjust, if you will, the dollars that you see within the administration budget. And so with that, I'll turn it back to you, President Deere, to see if there's any person besides yourself from the board that has any questions on the individual program budgets.
I'm sure Desi does. Do you, Desi?
No, I don't have any questions right
Oh,
now.
okay. Anyone else? Other board members?
No, thank you, President Deere. Thank you.
Director Gray, go ahead. Oh, no, you said no, thank you. Okay. And is Director Williams aboard yet? Not. Okay. But Director Houston, do you have any questions?
No, thank you.
Okay. Well,
All right.
These recommendations for the canceling of membership, are these going to be done at the next board meeting?
So again, this is, would be part of the budget process here. But what we wanted to do is to share with you some of the comments from the February 23rd workshop And the comment was, could you provide more information on these 4 particular organizations? I know an email was sent to the director on March 9th that provided a little bit more information associated with this, with staff's recommendation around them. And so we're just highlighting, if you will, those particular 4 organizations, the dollar amount, and what our recommendation is. So based off of that, you can see the Alliance for Water Efficiency. We're asking to maintain that membership at the amount of $1,600. For the Association of Metropolitan Water Agencies and the Climate Registry, the feedback that we received from others outside of the organization, as well as from staff inside the organization, we are recommending that we cancel those. And with the Southern California Water Coalition, that one's a little bit more complex in that we certainly have a higher dollar amount there. The question was, can we lower that dollar amount there? You can see a couple options there. We do value from Southern California Water Coalition, not just being a member, but being a founding member. And at that founding member, we're recognized, if you will, on many of the efforts that they do, not only from their meetings, but also from other sort of efforts that are there. But that being said, we're showing it still at $25,000 here in the budget. But if the discussion around it should move down to the executive level or the premier level, certainly I will ask EJ to kind of provide some context. I know he had a direct conversation with the executive director of Southern California Water Coalition. Again, based off of the staff's recommendation, we would reduce the amount that you see in the budget there. So the amount that you heard Julie say earlier would come down by that $14,500 unless another decision is made on the Southern California Water Coalition. And so I don't know if we want to pause there before we go into sponsorships. That was other follow-up and address that first.
Director Deere, this Director Gray, may I? President Deere,
Yeah,
I have a question.
go ahead, Director.
I'm on the phone. Oh, thank you. I'm on the phone for the Southern California Water Coalition. What is the current sponsorship level right now?
We are currently paying.
I can't say it.
My apologies, Director Gray. So we are currently paying $25,000, and it would maintain that level of $25,000 into fiscal year 22-23. So it'd be a no change, but there was a comment there that are there other levels that we could be at to lower the amount that's there?
Yeah, I would certainly support leaving it at the same level. I think we get benefits from that, and I think the executive director has talked with the acting general manager. He certainly is going, and I think Scott, Director Houston plays a key role in that. With that group, I think he chairs a water committee there. So I think it is beneficial. So just want to make that comment.
Very good.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
I do have a comment.
Desi, go ahead.
On the Southern California Water Coalition, I appreciate that it's an organization that it serves the water community. We are participating at the highest level, and there are multiple levels. The founding member level, which is at 25,000, executive member, which is 15,000, premier member, which is 10,000, patron member, which is 5,000, advisory member, which is 2,500, and basic membership, which is 1,000. I think for the benefits of networking, participation in all policy task forces, receiving all the publications, and access to the legislation tracker, subscription to the Southern California Water Coalition newsletter and their alerts, and just receiving general communications. All of those services and all of those benefits apply to all the membership levels. So I'm not quite sure that there's that much of a difference between $1,000, which is the basic membership level that gives you access to all of that, which is the critical information and the important reason for belonging to an organization, versus belonging at the $25,000 member, which is primarily gives you tables at the annual meeting and dinner for 10 guests, dinner recognition, and a bunch of other incidental costs that, in my opinion, I cannot support, I don't see the benefit in getting that. If individual directors want to attend these dinners, we have a budget, a separate budget that we can use for that. So the benefit of belonging to the organization is doable at the basic level, which is $1,000 versus $25,000. I'm not convinced by the argument that we need to pay for all of this additional recognition, et cetera. I think that that recognition comes from to the agency in any event. And the benefit, the participation in the dinners, which may or may not be attended to by board members, and all of the other kind of fluff that goes along with it is not worth the investment, in my opinion. That's just my comments.
Any other comments?
Sure, this is Director
Scott,
Houston.
go ahead.
Yeah, I would just echo with what Director Gray had said and maintain the level, but also the Executive Director, Charlie Wilson, he had reached out just to let me know he's available anytime if we would like to have him talk about any more information on this as we make that decision. So I think that's something we might be open to as well.
Okay.
You might want to consider maybe the $10,000 level. You still get 10 guests at the annual meeting and dinner. You still get 10 guests for the quarterly meetings and so on. There's not much more of a difference between the two, but it's a $10,000 savings. And likewise between $15,000 and $10,000. But in any case, I understand Charlie's a very nice guy, and he's going to come in and in his role, he's going to talk about all the great things that they do. That's his job as the general executive director of the Southern California Water Coalition, to promote that organization and to generate as much revenue for that organization as possible. I commend him for doing his job, but it's not too seen an argument for spending money.
Director Alvarez is finished, President. I'd like to make additional comment.
Go ahead,
Can you hear
Director
me?
Gray.
Yeah. I think it's more than, I appreciate the fact that you recognize he's a nice guy or whatever, and he does a great job for his organization, but it's really an advocacy group, and it supports, programs or water issues. And I think it's a little bit different than just going to a meeting or going to a conference. It does more than that. It does messaging in terms of making sure that our messages are out there as it relates to if it's water recycling or water issues. So I think it's a little bit different than just going to a conference or going to a luncheon. And that's why I think it's important to be at that level, to continue to be at that level. I mean, I think we were probably one of the founding members of that organization and so forth, but I think it does a great job of messaging and making sure that water messages are out there in the public, and I think that's really important in terms of outreach. So thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? All right, let's press on. Margaret, you're talking, but we can't hear you.
I did go off of mute. Thank you so much. Yes, let's go on to the next page, page 31 or page 12 shown on screen here. There was also another comment, actually a couple comments raised regarding our sponsorships. So you heard mentioned that there are two different places for sponsorships. There are ones that are included within our board services budget, which is, cost relating to our directors programs. Those are our community outreach. We have a $75,000 budget associated with this. But we also have within our administration budget, $93,250 reflected in there for also sponsorships. These had historically been sort of our water-related ones in which we had identified some key ones that we wanted to participate in, had specifically called them out, and as they were coming up, we would then just be paying them. In July of 2021, the board says, we'd like to change the approach. We would like to bring these back to you on a each one as they come through and make sure that we're still in agreement that we want to move forward with those sponsorships here. So that's a little bit of a background of what these sponsorships are. So these are intended to be sort of the water related ones where you, unlike the community ones where you had to have a booth or have a speaking opportunity or materials printed, these are ones in which, you know, they already have a water nexus associated with it. So the two comments that were raised is, can you provide us a history of that actual spend on to the budget so that we can sort of see sort of where we have been on this particular one. And the second is comment that was made is, can we reduce the outreach budget to $25,000? And so I believe that the two questions sort of work together as to sort of where have we historically been on this particular item, if you will. And can we get to that point of 25,000, or is some number, a different number than the budgeted number of 93,250 the right number? So as you see here, there are the items that are listed on the left are those that, you know, that were specifically called out, and you can see the budget associated with them. Some of them we already have a membership associated with them. These are additional sponsorship opportunities on top of that, usually as associated with an annual conference or a biannual conference, if you will. But then you also have some that we don't have that sort of conference or a membership really associated with it, such as the, let's see if I'm looking down here, the South Bay Council of Governments. We don't have a membership per se with them, but we have contributed to them in the past, if you will. I did want to highlight there, I know we just talked about the Southern California Water Coalition. That one there, you can see that we actually had a specific carve out for, if you will, sponsorships. And now we no longer have that because that becomes part of, if you will, the membership at that founding level, and in addition to all the other benefits that I believe Director Gray had just shared with you. So with that, you can see that over the period of time, we did increase it because we were starting to see there were some other opportunities that were coming up that were not specifically budgeted for. So we started to create this other available for other sponsorships, and some of them have been used associated with that. But that is certainly not one in which, you know, we necessarily need to keep on a go forward basis if there is a defined list that the board is comfortable with. With that, you can see that we have budgeted at 93, but we have not spent the 93 on the last couple years. This is fiscal year 1920 and 2021 that are showing on the screen here. You can see that the numbers have been around the $56,000 mark. In 21-22, the numbers are not shown on this page here, but I will tell you it's a lot less. I think we're maybe just under $10,000 spent here for that fiscal year 21-22. And I think it's just part of the, you know, are we in person? Are we hybrid still? Sort of dialogue that we had at the last conversation. So with that, that takes me through my comments as it pertains to this particular worksheet. And I turn it over back to the board, you, Director President Deere, to see what comments there are on sponsorships.
Well, thank you. Are there any comments on the sponsorships?
You're saying that for the current year on sponsorships were about $10,000?
Yes, I think part of it is because before, like I said, if these sponsorships had come through, we would have paid them because they were already approved, if you will, on the approved list. Now each of them are being introduced as they are received. So I believe actually on the Finance and Administration Committee coming up here in just a few minutes, there actually is one of those items coming up, and so you'll start to see some of those dollars spending. I believe it has to do with the Aqua Conference, for instance. So that, I think that's why the spend has been a little bit lower this year, because our approach has been different in fiscal year 21-22. Yes, it is not quite at the $93,000.
So it seems like you could budget at 25,000 and it'd still be twice as much as we spent this year.
Quite possibly, yes.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Guess not. Thank you.
So then the final slides that I have here are just to give you a tee up of sort of the workshops that are coming. So on slide 13 on the screen, 32 on your PDF packet, shows you sort of what those individual workshops that are coming up. So March 30th, we have our capital project and funding workshop. April 6th is when we'll further discuss about our water sales and sort of how the variability of those sales certainly does have an impact on our budget. April 13th, we would bring the operating revenues and expenses all together. So you've been hearing all the underlying assumptions. This now gives you sort of an idea of sort of where are we on all these budgets? Where are we on our sales assumption? Let's bring it all together. Let's show you what that looks like. And then on April 27th, it's just not to look at not just the 1 year, but really to look at the 5-year forecast with everything put together and take into consideration some of the concerns that have been raised by the board about, the loss of revenues. What does that mean? Where are we on our debt? Where are we on our capital projects and how we're going to fund them? We'll talk about that there. On the following pages, it just goes into a little bit more detail. So starting on page 33, going through 36, it just really gives you details of what is intended to be spoken on at each of those workshops. I don't intend to necessarily to cover it today unless you like to, but that shows you what we intend to do on each of those workshops. And with that, that concludes my comments for the upcoming workshops.
Any comments on the workshop?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Board Member
Scott?
Houston. Yeah, number one, trying to get off mute quickly, but number two is, and I've let staff know, if the budget workshop happens on the 30th on the capital projects, I likely will not be able to attend that. Now, it's okay, if I'm not there, you guys decide to move forward, but if there's other options for that, that would be my preference. So if my colleagues maybe could look at new options for that particular workshop, because I'd really like to understand what the capital projects and funding, proposals are, et cetera. But again, I won't be able to attend that one. So I just wanted to kind of put that back out there. If that might be something we could consider to looking at a different date at some point on that.
Director Houston, let me chime in here. So we have internally looked at different calendars. Unfortunately, we have a couple of staff members, executive staff members, that would not be able to accommodate unless we really pushed it back into the middle of April. And I would caution against that in the sense that this is something that I think the board members are going to really want to jump into and get very into the weeds, if you will, or into the finer details. What I've discussed with staff is that if we couldn't push this meeting as a whole, what we could do is an individual one-on-one with any board member that was not able to attend on the 30th. However, if it's the decision of the board to move it, staff will do the best we can to staff it, but I definitely want to have the necessary staff members there able to kind of walk us through all of the CIP programs and projects.
Okay, and just out of curiosity, how long do you anticipate that meeting's going to be?
That one will probably be one of the longest, I think. I'm anticipating quite a bit of detail as far as each of the individual projects and costs and kind of the history of it. So I'm anticipating maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours, and I think that's probably closer to 2 hours.
Okay. Okay, well, again, I mean, I don't want to hold it up because of my own schedule. I just have something that came up, a couple of things that day. I will not be physically available, but if you know you're going to have a quorum and you can move forward, that's, the board, that's up to the board if they can do that. I'll happily, of course, talk offline and go through things and provide some feedback, but I just, again, wanted to let people know I won't be at that meeting, so thank you.
President, dear, what date is that meeting again?
March 30th.
What is the date again?
Wednesday, March 30th.
I'm not sure if I'll be available. I'll have to check my schedule, but I'm not sure.
President Deere,
Desi?
I'm okay with moving the meeting to accommodate the board members. As the general manager said, I do think that this is going to be one of the more important workshops to conduct. I would think that it might go over 2 hours.
I would think so too.
So we may want to consider doing it on a weekend, on a Saturday morning. I'm open to that if the rest of the board would like to do that, but it would be good to accommodate all of the board.
President Deere,
Yes.
I do have the calendar in front of me. Although it wouldn't push it back too much, but if you wanted to move it to the 31st, it looks like it's fairly open as far as the board members' calendars are concerned. Although I don't know your individual calendars, but the director as a whole, the collective, looks like the 31st would be available.
It would be for me. How about the rest of the board?
Hold on.
Thursday the 31st.
I'm not sure about the 31st either, but don't schedule it around my schedule.
How about Director Houston? How about you?
The 31st won't work for me.
Fine. What did he say?
I'm sorry, the 31st will not work for me.
Oh, it's not good.
It would work for me, but
How about April 1st? April Fool's Day.
April Day.
Same
Friday,
thing.
April 1st.
That Thursday and Friday, I'm going to be out of town.
Oh,
You know, why don't we just have staff circulate back to all of us if that's better?
okay.
I think that's.
Will do.
Yeah.
We'll look for alternatives.
Okay. Moving right along. What's next?
Well, that concludes our comments here. Again, slides 33 through 36 just goes into the details of the specific ones, and we're happy to take any comments about those particular items. But otherwise, we appreciate your time and your comments today, and we will be seeing you. Well, if not March 30th, certainly on April 6th. So we'll figure out the time of the CIP budget.
Okay. And the Finance and Ad Committee has a meeting at 11:30, so I'll adjourn this meeting, and we are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Deere, members of the board and staff.
Thank you.
Thank you.